Cool. Now we're ready. Yeah, Kristen and Drew should be on soon, but are also having busy Mondays per the usual.
I feel like making oneself available on a Monday afternoon is like an Olympic sport, and everyone here is a champion. It's a real mad dash.
I know.
It feels like an obstacle course.
Yeah. Ugh.
I feel like as soon as I like get up from my desk to walk over to this desk, I see my inbox start going like bing, bing, bing. And I'm
Yeah.
like,
That's exactly what happened to me. We're moving in a couple weeks, and so we've been gradually packing up the house, spending, like 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there, boxing stuff up, and I got a little carried away boxing stuff up, and then was like,
yeah.
I was
Did
like,
you
oh,
actually
I
move?
don't. Yeah, I did.
But not the very heavy one.
Not that one. I can't lift that one. I boxed a box of books together that is so heavy that I can't actually move it out of the living
combination
room.
of loving books and hating strength work is really tough when you're moving.
Half of it is cookbooks, at least.
Yeah.
If anybody needs cookbooks, we'd be happy to donate. Please send us an email.
Oh, I definitely have a couple cookbooks in there that I'm like, we need to get rid of this.
Just a heads up, they are all vegan cookbooks.
I have this one weird, it's like an Argentinian vegan cookbook, and all the ingredients, and I was like, when I bought it on Amazon, I was like, this sounds so amazing. And then the ingredients are like, take one of your TVP prawns, and I'm like, where the hell do you get a vegan prawn? Like, I'm not
vegan prawn.
I'm not doing that.
Wait, what is that?
It's like a prawn made out of like soy. It's a soy prawn.
Whoa. That sounds, I don't even know what that's supposed to taste like.
I don't either, because I don't know where the hell to buy a soy prawn.
Yeah.
Argentina, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. I had one of those boxes as well, and I wrote sorry on it, and everyone just referred to it as the sorry box. Like, oh, where should I put the sorry box? Or I can't lift the sorry box, or sorry for your back box. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at that box and I'm like, I'm probably going to have to put those books in some other boxes and put some pillows in that box or something instead, because I tried to lift it and I was just like pushing it across the floor. Like it wasn't going to happen. I'm not a bodybuilder. It's got to be 100 pounds, more than 100 pounds.
You got to lift with your legs.
It is stuck. My legs I can't even get it up off the ground. I mean, it is like mind blowing. Like 20 books or something weigh that much.
Yeah.
20 cookbooks. If you need cookbooks, email us. We've got some good ones. We don't need them all.
Yeah.
Anyways, cool. Well, we got back we went camping over the weekend and it was really nice. Something that we've decided to try to do this summer is every other week or so is to take part of a weekend off the grid. Just as a way to reset for both of us, to get off of the computer and the electronic devices. It's been actually an interesting ongoing topic between Zoe and I, because I tend to be able to reset in different ways than Zoe. And Zoe,
I have to literally be forced kicking and screaming off the grid.
Zoe really needs to like go somewhere to reset, to like get away from work.
If I have access to my cell phone and my cell phone has access to service, I just engage in behaviors I'd rather not engage in. And one of the great things about like the San Juans is that you can't.
Yeah.
You can't do that there.
We ended up finding this new camp spot that we hadn't ever been to before in Telluride, which is a really nice a mountain town about 3.5 hours from where we live. And I don't know, some of you guys on the call are from Colorado and have probably been there. But it is a super great place for mountain running and adventuring and exploring. Mm-hmm. We found like a really great campsite and slept at 11,000 feet. And it was tough to sleep up that high the first night.
We were suffering rough. So hard. At first I was like, this is gonna be awesome. We're gonna get some like sick altitude training. And then at like midnight, we're just laying in the truck looking at each other like I can't breathe. How the hell am I supposed to run at this altitude when I can't even nap at it?
Yeah. Oh man. And then that led to some like pretty interesting runs on Saturday, but
I think we both had some of
Yeah.
our worst long runs ever
it was a
at the same
classic
time.
challenging
like a
Saturday long run.
tandem disaster.
But beautiful views. Would totally recommend it if you guys are looking to explore this summer and get up high.
If you want to have a bad long run, that's a really good place to do it.
I've had many good long runs out there, actually. But to tell you the truth, most of my long runs there have been with you.
Yeah,
I don't get to do many solo runs.
Yeah.
There.
It was nice because we did our runs separately, which I was really grateful for.
That was the first. I was like hoping that all right, I get to run at my own pace. This is going to be a sick run. I'm going to like get so many PRs. No,
Yeah.
definitely did not. No PRs at all.
Yeah. I went like we did a route that we had partially done like 3 years ago, like before I even got a coach and started training, and I like didn't even PR some of those segments, which
tough.
is probably really healthy. But at one point I texted TJ like, I'm having a vision quest, it's gonna be a while. I just get a text from him that says, yeah, me too. And I was like, oh boy. Hopefully someone makes it back to Bowie today.
Oh yeah.
We all survived.
It was a good weekend. I feel more refreshed.
Yeah, but just know that if you have absolute like soul crushing garbage cry on the trail long runs, you're in really good company.
Yeah, totally. And we wrote a blog on this. It's called Adventuring Imperfectly. And I often refer to that after having tough long runs in places where, you know, I've driven a long time. I've taken hours to pack and prepare for a camping adventure and have like high expectations for, you know, an amazing weekend. And then like things kind of don't go as planned. And I think that, you know, that is really something that as runners, like we have to embrace, especially as ultra runners. There are so many variables that just affect how you're going to feel out there. And if you don't really give yourself a chance, if you don't like take the initiative to go out and have that adventure, you're kind of missing out on these like incredible learning experiences or being able to reinforce these important perspectives that you can get out there on a day that doesn't quite go your way. And something for me over the weekend was like really just trying to like take a step back and experience where I was rather than just trying to breeze through the terrain as quickly as possible, which is something that I tend to like to do. But then I kind of miss out on some of the aspects of being in nature that make it so special. So when you're forced to go slow because you're not feeling your best, you certainly get to enjoy where you are in a different way. And so sometimes having a tough day or an imperfect adventure, as I like to call it, helps to facilitate other things, or the understanding that like, you know, your long runs really aren't a referendum on your athletic ability at all. In fact, having a tough long run is probably beneficial for you as you get closer to, you know, a very specific focused race or adventure that you might have on your schedule. Having had those moments to refer back to, knowing that like, hey, it was tough, but you were okay. You were fine. Like you made it, you finished. You know, something that sometimes comes up for me is like, man, like I'm running, I feel so bad. Like, am I going to make it? Like, what if I just like end up out here forever? And that's, you know, that's never been the case. So
even though it does always feel like that at some point, you're like,
yeah,
maybe I should have brought an emergency blanket.
Totally. Check that blog post out, guys. If you haven't, I feel like summer, at least in Colorado, it goes so quickly. So I would really recommend like getting out, adventuring, getting out on the trails, doing something that you know, that is new to you, trying something new, you know, like we ran like really steep runs over the weekend. And that, you know, that is new to us this year, not new to us in like a life of running way, but like very steep, very new to us for this season. And sometimes when you're embracing something that you haven't done in, you know, a year, it kind of hurts and it is really challenging and it takes several times out to get it right. And yeah, that's kind of part of the process and totally cool. Even though it doesn't, it's more of a type 2 kind of fun where like a few hours later, you're like, yes, that was awesome. I'm so glad I did that loop.
Yeah.
Even though in the moment you might be in the pain cave a little bit, I like to say.
Might be some pain cave time.
Yeah. Mental, emotional pain cave. Could be physical, could be pain cave, could be both.
Could be
cave.
all of the above. Yeah.
Very big cave, very dark. but it's okay.
She's making really cute faces at us.
Yeah. So anyways, I'm just curious if any of that comes to mind for you guys, if you guys have had some runs like that.
Yeah. Sound off if you
please chime
spent
in
time
the
in
chat
the pain
box.
cave.
Yeah. We don't like to spend time in the pain cave alone. That's for sure. So it's
Party in
fun
the pain cave.
to know that you guys are out there as well. But we were going to address a couple questions that we didn't get to talk about on last week's Coach's Corner, because we will not be having a call this week. Zoe is out going to Western States.
Not like running it or anything.
For work, so we
we'll
won't be
there
here. Yeah.
Writing.
But somebody's out there.
There's like a crowd of very loud children outside of our apartment right now.
Yeah, so anyways, there was a couple questions that I wanted to chat about. But first, who else has been in the pain cave? Oh yeah. Do you want to tell us about that?
I feel like every day of my life is the pain cave.
Life is the pain cave.
Yeah, life is a pain cave.
There's some runs where I purposely set myself up to be in the pain cave. As long as I'm not injuring myself, I feel like I learned so much by finding out where my threshold is, like where am I able to max out? And like I always joke every training cycle, be like, man, a bonk has got to come soon. Like I got a bonk, so I appreciate my ability and I know where that end zone is, and just kind of like, I don't know, you do it safely, right? You don't get somewhere where you're going to get in trouble, but I kind of like putting myself in the pain cave.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there are some times where it is like so important to like, I always compare it to my athletes, like holding your hand to the flame. You don't want to be like, you don't want to walk away totally burnt, right? Like you do want to be able to like kind of, every so often maybe kind of push it on a long run to get curious about like, maybe expanding your easy effort or, something like that. But you never want to like, I don't know, like you don't ever want to bonk in the high alpine where there's like search and rescue becomes a potential, and it's all about like knowing logistically, like what supports your adventure and like how that factors into your training. And I think that like, yeah, especially for marathon training, I feel like there is like a much stronger relationship with like, you really do want to like kind of get singed a little bit on some of those long runs, maybe by experimenting with like, doing 4 to 6 miles at marathon pace in the context of a long run, or doing tempo efforts. And those can be really, really useful, like productive ways of experimenting with failure.
Yeah, for sure. Or, I like some of my athletes, once they've got a good foundation to, push the last 2 miles of long runs, to simulate like a hard finish at a race. I think for a lot of the athletes, we tend to start way too hard, especially in ultra running. And that kind of creates a situation where you end up in the pain cave for these really, really long durations of races. So sometimes, it really depends on the athlete, but I really like when athletes practice the strong finish, saving something for later on in the run. That also really helps kind of overcome some of the mental barriers that are associated with running faster in a fatigue state or in a tired state after you've been out there for a long time. It kind of helps to override the central governor a little bit, to build the self-belief, to show you that you've got more left in you, even though you've been a little bit in the pain cave. You've been out there running for a long time.
And like that's something, I mean, not only is this like borne out in a lot of studies around exercise physiology, but like you will race what you practice. So if you practice slogging and feeling sorry for yourself in the last couple miles of every long run, that's like how you're going to finish all your races. But if you go out there and you practice feeling strong and employing positive self-talk and getting your body to that place where you're like, yeah, does it feel so good to push the pace right now? No, it does not, but that's what we're going to do.
Yeah. I'm loving some of these comments here about the backcountry pain cave being a good place to help remind you that you should be thankful for your car and just making it back to your car safely.
Yeah.
That is just so true. I was thinking about that a lot on my Saturday run this weekend. Yeah. Well, cool. How about we hit up one of these questions? I know a lot of people have goals on their mind, because, it's summer. Finally, the pandemic is starting to at least taper off a little bit to give some of us who are vaccinated, especially, in the US, a chance to race. And even, we're seeing some races happen for our European athletes too, which is really cool. Um, so with that said, as these races start to open up, I think a lot of people are thinking, what is a realistic goal? How do I challenge myself? What's a good stretch? Um, I have this running history, but I'm not sure where to take it. So we have a question about, like, how do I choose a challenging goal? How do I choose a race or an objective that is enough of a stretch that it's challenging, but not so much of a stretch that it's a giant leap? Um, how do I figure out what goal is achievable for me? And I think this is a really interesting question. It's obviously, like much of the stuff we talk about, it's just so individual, right? Um, but I think there are some maybe broader rules that we could maybe look at this kind of question, through, or a lens that we could look at this through. Um, yeah, and I think the first one is really just like looking at it's for me, it's like a two-pronged approach. One, it's like looking at the past events that you've done, um, and looking at, like, were you chasing cutoffs? Like, what was your time? How did you feel, when you're looking at those past races? And try not to be judgmental about that, but just being like, I was well in front of those cutoffs. Like, it was a hard race, but I finished with plenty of time. Or like maybe you're a mid-pack runner and you're like, well, it was a really hard race, but I feel like I have room to grow. Like maybe I could get into that top 20, that top 10. Kind of looking at your time, seeing where you're at. And I think the other kind of side of this is saying, what kind of goal can I establish based on what I've just seen, like what I've just reviewed? Um, is it a goal of, like, I would like to improve my time at these races, or is it a goal of I would like to see how much farther I can go? Because I know for a lot of people, whether you're running your first 5 or 10K, which so many of my athletes are, or if you're, looking to run your first 50K, or you've run dozens of 50Ks, a lot of people, if you look at what you've done and you ask yourself, what am I capable of? What is the next logical step to that? Is sometimes it's to go farther.
Sometimes, but not always. I think, the big thing, we see a lot of people get sucked into thinking they need to go further and further to, like, validate their progress or their worth. And the only goal that is good for you is the one that matters to you, right? Like, you don't need to do, you don't suddenly become a runner when you run an ultra. You don't suddenly become an ultra runner when you get, a shiny belt buckle at a 100 miler. You were that person the whole time. So don't go looking to distance to validate your excellence as an athlete, because you will always feel empty and tired.
No, but I think distance is a logical place that we see a lot of people go to.
Yeah,
I would say the majority.
But I think that's a flawed perspective.
It
the better I get at running, the more I'm like figuring out like what specific niche of like what discipline I'm most excited about.
I don't want to say that that's a flawed. That's flawed, because I don't want to tell.
If you're guided by genuine curiosity, it's fine. But like, just because you've done a 50K doesn't mean you need to now go do a 50 miler. Just because you've done a 50 miler doesn't mean like, oh man, now you got to sign up for that 100K, and like, oh, did 100K, barely made it, time to do that 100. Like, if you're barely making it, that's an awesome time to invest in improving at like that discipline, that distance, before just feeling like you always have to be like upping the ante.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that it's important, again, refer to the first thing that I said, which is like, reflect on the things that you have accomplished and ask yourself, how did those things feel? Is there room to improve in those specific events? And I think the other side of this too is to, when you're looking back at the events that you've done, to establish an understanding of what you enjoyed about those events, and then maybe what you didn't. Was it the terrain that you enjoyed? Was it the specific kind of style of that race? Was it, I enjoyed like the big atmosphere of running at UTMB, or like I really prefer like local races that are much smaller and there's like less fanfare and all of this stuff going on. Like for each person, we have to have our likes and our dislikes when it comes to adventures, when it comes to choosing your racing and races and your goals. And through those likes and your dislikes, you can start to narrow down what you want to choose to focus your time on. Because after all, like we have to focus on this stuff for, months and years to really do it well. So if you're going to focus on something for that amount of time, which is a significant amount of time, it has to be something that really resonates with you. Like Zoe said, it has to connect with you. So that can be a distance goal, that can be a performance goal, like improving on a time that you've done before. For some people that I coach, it's like, well, I've run this 50K, but I really want to work on speed this year and get faster, so that way I can cover that 50K distance quicker. Or I want to become a more durable athlete so I can run that 50K and not feel completely demolished by the end. It really depends on the individual and the curiosity. But for me, when I look at these goals and when I kind of advise athletes, and I say that loosely, but it's more like giving guidance. You want to first start with like, I like these things about these races that I've done, or I'm curious about these kinds of races and whether or not I'm able to, perform at those kind of races. And then I think sometimes, bouncing those ideas back and forth with your coach. I think a good coach will kind of steer you towards goals that you have also kind of articulated that you enjoy. So for example, like something that I'm always like telling my coach is like, oh, maybe I'll just like go do this race because I got a free entry. And he'll say to me, you've told me that you really enjoy doing local races and really steep races. So why would you go and do this flat 100K? And I'd be like, oh yeah, thank you. Thanks for keeping me in line with like what I actually like, rather than like running off on this tangent to go
like,
do a race that I
just
could
getting
get an
pulled
entry.
in the direction of like, well, I have a friend doing this, or like,
Yeah.
I saw someone on Instagram said this is cool.
Yeah, I think that that's really important. And so, having those conversations through, an email or the logs, whatever it is with your coach, just to kind of bounce those ideas back and forth. And I think for some athletes who have like just kind of come in and started working with Microcosm, your coach might not know you that well yet. So like it can help to articulate what kind of adventures you enjoy, when you go out and do like a Saturday run and the coach, only sees the data and you just have like one or two sentences about what you did, that might not be enough communication to like help your coach over time see that like you really enjoy like these kind of like flowy single track runs, or like you're really enjoying like these steeper runs where like you can get your heart rate down through power hiking and then fly on these technical descents. I don't know, whatever it is that you like, if you articulate those things to your coach over, dozens of check-ins over many months, your coach has a better idea of the things that you like and then can help kind of steer you towards making those like good decisions when it comes to your goals. It's like the worst thing is like when you are working with an athlete, you're helping them over many, many months, you're building towards like a big goal. And then all of a sudden you're like 6 weeks out after like 12 weeks of intense training. And they're like, I don't even know why I chose this goal in the first place. This race doesn't make sense to me. This race totally sucks. And then they like just want to drop out of the race. And as a coach, you're like, well, we just put in all this work. Like maybe you should see this through. But sometimes on the other hand, as a coach, you're like, well, if your heart isn't in this, if this isn't the race that's really speaking to you, let's not go and do it, especially when it's an ultra. Like your heart really has to be in those distances in order for you to have success out there and have a race that you feel good about. Do you have Drew, Kristen? I mean, do you
Yeah,
Zoe, do you guys have
I wanted to
anything
say
that
real
you'd
quick,
like
just to kind of like pile on to what you're talking about, like for me as a runner, and what I see a lot of times for, I guess, runners around me, is that there's some sort of like natural pressure that runners put on other runners to ask them the question, what's next? Like as if what they've just achieved or what they've just done. Like the question, right, or it says something about like that they've won or they've run 3 50Ks, and then what do I do next? We put the pressure on ourselves, and we maybe unknowingly put the pressure on other people to do something further or bigger or whatever you want to call it. And just to reemphasize, TJ, you are absolutely right. If you run marathons because that's what you love to do, or you run 50Ks because that's what you love to do, why are you going to let someone pressure you into running a 50 miler or 100K or whatever? It doesn't make a ton of sense. That's kind of a recipe for disaster, for you to feel burnt out and you to forget the reason why you're running in the first place. You find out what you like to do and why you like to do it, and then really try to spend time perfecting the craft. There are people that spend decades just running the 5K. You know what I mean? So it's not like, okay, I ran a 5K, now I have to do 10. Now I did a 10K, now I got to do half marathon, then a marathon, then a 50K, then a 50 miler. And eventually you're just out of control and you kind of lose sight of what you did it all to begin with.
Yeah,
Totally.
so true.
Yeah.
Drew.
I mean, anyone who doesn't think short distance races aren't badass isn't watching the trials, because that's incredible.
Yeah, seriously.
I wish I could run steeplechase. I want to quit running ultras and just run like once and a half around the track with like one thing to jump over.
Wish I could run.
I just wish I was Emma Coburn.
Right.
She made her heat look so easy the other night. But
yeah.
anytime there's a track meet at Hayward Field, whether it's like the Olympic trials or outdoor or NCAA nationals, I'm just like a kid in a candy store. Like it's been really hard for me to actually get work done because I'm just like, who's racing? What's happening?
Dude,
what was the time?
Reading like every single roundup possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. But steering the conversation back to, I agree with everything Drew said. I've only run one 50 miler. I've only raced, I guess, 150. Is that true? Yeah, I guess it is. But I mean, there's definitely been, like moments that I've felt that pressure from other runners, and I've felt that pressure from myself to go further and to do more, to run higher mileage or whatever. But like, at the end of the day, I know my body. I know my coach. I trust my coach. I trust the training. And I think that in time, yeah, sure. Eventually when I'm ready to make that next step or set that goal to go further, I will. But right now I'm not there. Like, I love 50K and under distances. I love rolly single track, and I think, it's good to experiment and like try out different types of races if you don't know what you like. There was an event 2 summers ago where TJ and I went to Tahoe to do the Broken Arrow Sky Race, and I learned very quickly that I do not like sky racing, and that was a very important moment for me, because I like, going into that race, I was like, I want to try to be the female sky racing champion of the United States, and like had these big lofty goals. Did one sky race and was like, oh no, like I'm sticking with 50Ks and we're running flat. Like, I just like that was a great learning experience for me. So don't ever let people or races or pressure, make you feel like you have to go further or do more than you enjoy doing.
Yeah, and so kind of what I'm hearing really from all three of you guys is that, like, for one, it's like, don't fall prey to external pressures. Like, really make sure that your goals reflect, kind of who you are, the things that you enjoy. But also, don't be afraid to follow curiosity. So if your curiosity is like, what does sky running feel like? I want to get out there and try sky running, go give it a shot. Do a steep race and see what that feels like. And then, if you love it, or you're like, I'm not sure, maybe I'll try another one. Cool. But if you feel like, that's not for me, I think, flatter races on single track is more my style. That's fine. I mean, in order to kind of refine your choices and end up in a position like say, for example, Drew or Kristen, who Drew, really specializes in like marathon running, or is like seeking like fast marathon times. And Kristen is more involved in like shorter races, like loves 50K. Or I mean, has totally smashed even shorter races than that. But that is a product of having gone and done races that they were curious about, and they were like, I think, I'd rather go this direction, and then following that kind of intuitive thought, or however you want to say it, but like that like inner knowing, like I kind of want to go this way, I kind of want to go this way, and then you get there, and then you continue, and you give yourself that opportunity. And it's taking small steps. If you want to try a sky race for the first time, I wouldn't recommend going and doing the Minotaur. Like I would think about doing something that is a little bit more approachable first.
You don't have to do the hardest thing right away.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
If you are smart, you will do the hardest thing later. Like I get so many athletes who are like, I read online, this is the hardest marathon in the South. And I'm like, whoa, like, why now? Like, you're 30 days in the log, bro. Like,
yeah.
Woo, we've got time before we have to do like the wildest 100-miler on the West Coast. Like, we've got time.
Yeah.
And like, don't do something just because it's hard. Like I hate that. I hate when races market themselves that way. If you like challenging technical, or I think like to me, flat is very challenging. Like put a 14er in my way, like great. But like, don't put like a track is impossible for me. Like I hate that. So like, don't always like go looking or fall into the trap of like, I have to do this thing that says it's epic or gnarly or burly, or like, like you can just do what you want to do. Like, you don't have to prove anything to anyone.
Yeah, totally. I think this can really kind of go back around to like the idea of adventuring imperfectly. And then another thing that I often, ask my athletes to do if they're unsure of what goals, is to, in their long runs, experiment with different terrain. Maybe one weekend you go and do something that's really steep. You do 4,000 feet of climbing in 16 miles or 20 miles. And that's kind of like sky running. And you're like, wow, that was intense, but I don't know, maybe I'm not sure if that's for me. The next weekend you try something a little gentler, a little flatter. Wow, I really like how that felt. Maybe that's more my style. And then over time, you give yourself permission to like have those days where you're like, I didn't like that, I'll try this. And if you can give yourself those permissions, if you don't expect to have that like perfect adventure every time, eventually you start to have this like list of things. It's like, I love these runs, and then you go to Telluride and you're like, I'm going to do these 2 runs that I love, and you love them even if they go well or if they don't go well. But you like those kind of runs because you've done it, multiple times. And so giving yourself kind of that like long-term perspective on all of these things, like you don't have to have your biggest stretch goal on your first season working with a coach. You don't have to like step up from a 50K, like as soon as you feel curious about like what lies beyond that. You can refine your speed at 50K, you can refine your speed at 5K, you can become a better runner at any of these distances before even stepping up to 100. It's something that, I hear from Kristen and I relate to each other really well on this topic, because both of us are like all about running 50Ks and faster races, but have a curiosity for the 100-miler at some point in the distant future. And so, kind of responding to what you like now can be really helpful.
Yeah, something we used to tell our athletes was like, what if you couldn't tell anyone about your goal? Like you couldn't post about it on social media, you couldn't tell any of your friends you were going to do it. Would you still do it? And how would you feel about it if it had to just be a secret between you and your coach? And like, how does that help you think differently about your goal?
Think about your goals in that context. It makes things like
different,
really different, really. Yeah. I would say super real. Because I think, at least for me, if I have to tell other people about the goals that I pick, and I definitely pick goals because of what they would look like on a resume, what they'd look like when I approach my sponsors, what they would look like when I, market myself as a coach and build my resume, all of these things. And sometimes in the end, you end up, similar. I did well in the skyrunning series one season and totally, fell flat on my face the season after when Kristen and I went to Broken Arrow. So, these things, they change year after year. One season, I was curious about skyrunning, did really well. The next season, I expected to do extremely well in skyrunning and did not do well at all. And so these things happen. Like, you have to be able to make sure that if you're going to fall flat on your face going for a big goal, that you're doing that for you and for you only, not for external validation, or else you end up in a really tough spot mentally and emotionally. And we've all been there, or at least certainly I have. I won't speak for the other coaches, but
yeah.
Well, cool. We had another question, and we'll see if we can get some group participation on this one, because it is a participatory question for the athletes on the team. And I really like this question. But for those of you out there, doesn't matter how long you've been with Microcosm, but it doesn't matter how long you've been with Microcosm. At least a day. Yeah, maybe this isn't day one. But as an athlete, what piece of advice would you tell yourself? What piece of advice would you tell a new athlete who's just starting this program? I would love to hear from you guys, especially the ones who, some of these athletes, Derek, Jason, you guys have been with us for a while. What kind of advice would you give an athlete who is just starting with Microcosm? I'll give you guys a few seconds. If you just want to use the chat box, that's cool. And I'll just say the comments out loud. Awesome. Yeah. Marlea, just be patient. Sometimes you have to go back to the foundation and rebuild from the ground up. I love that perspective.
Yeah.
I love that. That is so much about what we do.
Yeah.
Derek, trust the process. Enjoy the
Even
process
better,
and trust
enjoy
your
the
coach.
process.
Yeah. Trusting the process and enjoying the process aren't always the same. I feel like, at least in my experience as an athlete.
I feel like you want to have both in different quantities all the time. Like, when maybe the trust isn't there, you can be like, well, at least I'm enjoying it, like I'll get there. And then, there's definitely going to be days that you're not that aren't all sunshine and rainbows. And that's when you're like, well, I trust the process.
Exactly. I think about that too. Like those folding the laundry days where you're like, I'm not stoked to go out and run. If I didn't have a coach and a training plan, I'd probably be resting today. But I really trust the purpose behind what I'm doing. So I'm going to go out there and get it done.
We both had absolutely garbage runs on Saturday. And we were both like, man, it's hard to have a run where you un-PR stuff. And it's like, am I actually slower than I was 3 years ago? And then on Sunday, we had runs where we PR'd a bunch of different stuff. Yeah. It's not letting any one day dictate how you engage with the process. Or even 1 week.
Or 1 month. That plateau.
Plateaus are real.
Yeah, seriously.
If you're regressing for a month, though, get a blood test.
I would say
and
that's
reduce volume.
Yeah. Cool. Anybody else? I know we've got a few newer athletes on the call, but we've also got some veterans.
Ooh, I love this one from Caitlin. Do you want to read that at the bottom?
Yeah. From Caitlin. You can want to do something better while still being enough. I love that. And then she goes on.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
And she goes on to say, what you do and how well you do it and who you are two different things.
Wow. Microcosm in a nutshell.
That is some wisdom right there.
I wish we had a graphic designer for someone, or actually can we get that posted on Instagram, Zoe? Can you just
oh man, I got logged out of the Instagram months ago. And then operating social media professionally has made me want to be on social media so much less.
It's not fun. I get that.
So not that fun.
Yeah.
I do love the Microcosm social. It was just, I wanted to never bring, I don't know, anything less than A game.
Yeah, the Microcosm Instagram account was the only thing
format.
keeping me on Instagram for a long time. I have it deleted off of my phone right now because I'm just like, I can't, I won't.
Yep. Feel you on that.
This is
I
an
also-
excellent quote, Caitlin.
Yeah.
I love this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write it on my wall, on the whiteboard.
I will repost that. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
applaud anybody who is limiting their Instagram time. You guys are awesome.
Good mental health decision.
Very good. Okay. All right. This is kind of an abstract question. It has been lingering on like months and we've never addressed it. It has been on there. One of my favorite athletes that I coach, she's been asking about this. It's going to be her 100-mile year. I've got my fingers crossed coming up on her race day. She wants to know, can you use meditation in an ultra to refresh yourself instead of sleep? I have been avoiding this question because honestly, I really don't know. I think you could, but I don't know how successful it is. I don't know if it will replace an hour of sleep when you feel like you need it. But what I do know is that in these races, you are out for hours and hours and you're pushing and you're very tired and your sympathetic nervous system is in a very heightened state. You're having a stress response because of how long you've been out there, the environmental factors that are involved in the race, the stresses of race day and the demands of that. Your heart rate, everything about you is heightened, right? You're in this very, very heightened state. If you end up in one of those situations, and we've seen this with athletes where all of a sudden you can't regulate your breathing, you have to sit down. It could be possible that doing some deep breathing or some grounding exercises could help to regulate your nervous system and get you back on track. Is it a replacement for sleep? I don't think so, but could it be a helpful tool in managing the stresses that you're having out there? I think absolutely, especially if you're an experienced practitioner.
So I did do a deep dive into the Google on this one, and there's obviously no specific study on like people using meditation to replace sleep in ultras. There's actually no real studies using meditation to replace sleep like at all. The closest I was really able to get is that, I mean, basically these are two separate functions, and though they have similar, though they're related, they are still separate, right? Like you can't sleep rather than meditate, you know, like sleep is not a mindfulness practice in the same way that a mindfulness practice is not sleep. While you might be able to get, like you said, some of the like, you know, lower, I would be doubtful that you're able to substantially lower cortisol production. Like if you're doing a 100 miler and you meditate for 20 minutes, like, probably, you know, not going to make a huge impact. I would say like your best bet towards lowering your cortisol is continuing down the road and trying to get that ultra.
I think if that's your goal for wanting to like do some deep breathing in a race,
I mean, you should definitely use
might be
mindfulness.
Some flawed logic.
Yeah. But no, meditation and sleep are different things. Like they have very discrete biological processes. So, you know, like you can't sleep instead of meditate also. Like I do not meditate for 8 hours a night. You know, my therapist would not be buying that one.
Yeah.
I think there's one thing to say that I've used personally during races or just like really tough long runs is like, it's not meditation per se, but it's just like, I like to think about, you know, like envision one person that I care about a lot. And it's just like that loving kindness meditation where like I put all of the energy that I'm outputting into like feelings and thoughts about this person. So, I mean, it could be my nephew, it could be my niece, it could be my sister, it could be Zoe, it could be, you know, could be anybody. And then like what personally helps me is after 1 mile, you switch people. So it's like Zoe gets mile 23, TJ's mile 27, my nephew's mile 24. And it just like really helps you zoom out and put the whole thing in perspective. I don't know if that helps anyone else, but that definitely is something that works well for me.
That is so cool. I love that visualization, Kristen, because I think that having that kind of positive, that like that positive visualization and that attaching the outcome or the goal that you have that you're racing for towards something beyond yourself can be really, really impactful, right? Like, so I'm putting this out there for my nephew. I'm putting this out there for so and so or for such a reason. Having those things that are, you know, beyond yourself, especially in the pursuit of your goals during the daily training process, can be and have proven to be really powerful. This is something that Steve Magnus writes about in Peak Performance, which is a really, really amazing book. And I would definitely recommend that everybody read that if you're into trying to refine your habits to help you, you know, succeed in the things that you're going after. Yeah, and I think that the mindfulness element to training is integral to becoming a more well-rounded athlete. You know, whether you're racing 100 miles or just trying to get through a week of training, mindfulness is something that is going to allow you to interpret your body feedback better. It's going to allow you to understand kind of the root causes for the things that you feel in a way that is more heightened, like in where you can get to the cause quicker and then keep yourself on track faster. Yeah, it helps with your focus and all of that. I think obviously the foundation for a lot of these things is in meditation. You know, there's a lot of athletes out there who, you know, running often feels meditative, or you can get into maybe a similar kind of mindset. But I always recommend to my athletes that you first start with, you know, a sitting or a lying down meditation and doing that several days a week, to have like a starting point, a grounding point in which then you can maybe start to apply the things that you feel in that setting to a setting where you're actually running and being in an environment where, you know, you're moving around different obstacles and up and down mountains and things like that. It's very hard to feel meditative when, you know, there's like all of this stuff going on around you. So you start at the basic level and then you let that evolve with time. Yeah, I think what Chris says here about Timmy Olson is interesting. You know, he's obviously a pretty well-known guy who meditates a lot, right? Like he has a meditation app and things like this. I would be curious to like know exactly how he's applying his meditation to his FKT attempt. I wonder if it's just to help ground him, to stay focused during such a long in effort, you know. That those are the things that just kind of come to mind initially for me, and maybe the ways that I would apply meditation. And then maybe to go back in those moments where you really feel elevated, to try to just like bring it down so then you can continue to like move forward. Yeah.
The Headspace app has, on the premium edition, they have a collaboration with the NBA where there's a 12-day performance. They call them packs. And there's one that's oriented towards like 12 days to get you mentally ready for a big sports event. And I've found that one really helpful.
Oh, that's cool. I've never heard of that one. That's awesome. Maybe you could share that on the Facebook group for the team.
I mean, it's in the app. Like you have to buy the app.
You have to buy the app to get that.
But meditation? It's very worth it. Like I'm a huge fan of Headspace. As someone not like, you know, necessarily like I don't identify as a very still person, calm person, but I think that having like really specific meditation practices can help you, you know, like you can develop more of like a mindfulness Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, it's definitely a very, I think a very useful tool for abroad, for many number of reasons. Yeah, and often one of those things that I feel like is kind of hard to talk about in really general terms, but yeah, I mean, we have plenty of athletes on the team who meditate and use that practice quite often. Derek, I'll just read what Derek wrote because I think it's pretty awesome that he finds that a meditation practice can allow him to pull back into a place where he can observe things while running. And that can be really helpful when he feels fatigued. during a big and difficult run. And I think that's just awesome. That's just like really nice to hear, right? Like being able to kind of almost detach a little bit from the sensations that you're feeling, in a way, in order to maybe be less critical about how that, about what you're feeling out there. I think sometimes when we're running, we train hard, we expect that a lot of these runs are going to feel good. But mindfulness and meditation practice really does allow us to observe kind of some of those thoughts and to kind of step away from them and be like, well, I'm not these thoughts, I'm not like all of these feelings, that's not all that I am. This isn't a reflection on me. And to maybe approach kind of those feelings in a way that is, a little more productive, like a little more inner coach, like, where you can support yourself through those difficult moments, to be calm in those moments rather than to make really quick decisions about like how that run is going to go based on how you're feeling in that moment. I think sometimes for me, when I'm in a tough moment in a race, it is really helpful to try to separate from those feelings of fatigue, or to respond with very like specific process oriented goals, in order to find the light that is beyond kind of those tough moments. Because if you fully dive into the feelings that you're feeling, I'm fatigued, this hurts, I'm fatigued, this hurts, and just repeat that over and over to yourself, it's going to be really hard for you to like find what lies beyond that. And that is a big part of ultra running and overcoming the tough moments in races, to have performances that kind of go beyond what you thought was possible for you. It's all about managing kind of the tough things that you feel out there. Like there's always these moments that just feel like total shit in these long runs, that just totally feel like crap in a long race. And I'm gonna say it, if you don't feel like that in a race, probably not pushing yourself to the hardest that you can to get the most out of it. It's nice to just finish a run feeling good, and most of your runs should feel that way. But if you're racing and you're really looking to see where your potential is, you're gonna come up against these tough feelings.
Yeah.
So I think having developed that inner dialogue, maybe some positive affirmations could be part of that as well, can really, really help.
Yeah, meditation and sleep, they are different things. Science said it.
They're two important recovery tools, though.
They're important and they're different. The same way you can't replace foam rolling with sleep, or sleep with foam rolling, or
Is foam rolling food? Is it the same as food?
You can't eat foam rollings.
Oh, darn it.
You can't eat meditation.
I thought meditation could replace eating.
Just whatever you want.
I'm so hungry.
Just gonna meditate on this.
All right. Well, yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We won't be here on Friday, but we'll be looking forward to talking with you all next Monday. Please send questions. We would love to hear if it's a topic that we've talked about before. We would love to talk about it again. We can always talk about these things in better and more articulate ways that are concise and easy for you to understand. And it gives us good practice too. So please send us questions this week for next Monday. Thank you guys. Have a great week. Have fun. Bye.